Morning everybody, Cole here. Bit windy outside today, so you may hear some of our little exhaust whirly gigs humming in the background today, so yeah, don't be frightened, it's not going to hurt you. So anyhow, last week we got to a stage where we had all of the work done on the cabinet, and ta-da, there it is. So we've got it all, I've got it all sanded and finished. The only thing I haven't done to it so far is put it back on it, but that'll come later. But at the moment I've got everything nicely done, sanded up, and the drawers work nicely, as you can see, and with all the cedar all matches and everything. So yeah, and that's how it's going to be displayed in the workshop. So if I need a jig, I can go and get a jig. If I need a box, I can show you a box and so forth, which we'll be doing today anyway. So anyhow, job done. So now our next task, before we go on to another box, is what I want to do is I want to talk to you or show you some of the things that I do with the router bits that we sell. Now, one of the most common questions that I get about the router bits is, how do I use it and what do I use it for? So over the next 2 weeks, what we're going to do is I'm going to demonstrate how to use the router bits that we sell. And they're not the definitive way of using them. You can use them any which way you like, but this is the way I use them, and this is the things that I use them for. So we'll go through all of that little bit by little bit, and we'll start with the first half of the kit. Now, if you bought all of the router bits, you would have a master cutter kit, and what we've done is we've broken it up into 2 parts. The first part is what we call our ultimate cutter kit. I'll just drop to another camera. There's our ultimate cutter kit, and as you can see, there's a number of router bits and a big bearing in the kit. And the other half of the kit is the ultimate upgrade. They're added together, they make a master cutter kit. So they're all the bits and pieces. We will go through all of the bits. It comes like this. So if I just open up the box, you'll see that in the box you've got a list of instructions. Now, it's not an exhaustive list of instructions. You can do all sorts of different things with it, but it'll give you a start as to what to do with it. So a couple of pages of information there, and you can get that comes in the kit as well. And when you open the kit, you'll see that we've got all the router bits here. Now, the router bits are all made by or sourced from Carbitool in Melbourne. And some of them are made specifically to our design, and some of them are just over-the-counter router bits. But we've put them together as a collection so that you've got lots of different router bits to use for various reasons. So I'm not going to take these out of the packet, so I don't think there's any need to, but you can see on the bottom of each of the pack, you can see you've got the instructions on, or the code name and code numbers for each of the router bits. You can see that on there. So I won't take these out of the packets. What I will do is I will use the router bits that I have sitting around the workshop. So I'll take that pack away, and I've made a fancy little box. That's this one here.
Can you increase the volume slightly?
Don't know how. Okay. So that's my little box, and that's where I keep all of my router bits. So it's just a matter of just put them all together. I've got a little box. Just got to stop for a second. I've just got to adjust my sound. Okay, try that. Sound good? Someone was asking for more volume. Okay, so we've all sorted that anyway. We're back to the boxes now. using the router. Safety first, all the time. You can see we've got a table. Of course, I'll shift the impediments off it. That has basically just a hole in the middle of the router of the table where we're using our router bits, and I make all the fences. So I'm going to make one for you and show you how I make the fences as well. But we make everything's sticking up above the router table. So the idea is, while you're working on it, keep your hands off the table. Don't be one of those fastidious people who like to brush all the sawdust away, because if you do that while the router bit's spinning, of course you're going to cause yourself an injury. So very careful how we go about it, and there's the techniques in using the router bits so that they're used safely and not not going to hurt yourself with them. So we'll go through a bit of that as well. So first up, what I want to do is, if I've made a box, and I've got lots of bits and pieces here, if I've made a box frame, I've got two different types here. The next step after making the box is to actually cut feet in the bottom of the box, cut a trench in the bottom of the box for a base. So to do that, this is number one out of our kit. The first router bit out of our kit is what we call our panel raising bit, rebate cutter, I should say. Okay, so that's what my rebate cutter looks like. It cuts a 4mm trench 5mm deep, and that's how it comes from a Carby tool. We use this, or I use this, in conjunction with the big bearing that's in the kit. And the big bearing looks like that. Okay, so it's a 19mm bearing, and I take the little bearing off the top and put the big bearing on it, reducing my depth of cut down to 1.5mm. Now, in doing that, it means I can use different techniques to cut the trench. So we'll go through that and I'll show you how to go about that. So my first step, a router in the, should have got my spanner out before I started, a router in the kit, and then while it's sitting up like that, I will then change the router bit, change the bearing. So 3/32 Allen key. Now we sell the Allen key, so you can get them from us. But you can also buy these T-handle ones from any reputable hardware store. They'll have something like that, and as you can see, it's quite easy to use. And then I've reduced my depth of cut down to, as you can see, very, very small. I'm going to try and get as close as I can with these guys, so you have to bear with me during these processes. You can see that the depth of cut now has changed. Just got to turn that so that you can actually see it. Now you can see there's very little of the router bit tooth exposed. You can see it on this side here as well. Okay, so I'm going to do a start of the cut. So we start with the cut at 1.5mm. We then adjust the height. Again, I should have had this tool out. So what I'm going to do now is drop down to 10mm. Now, I cut all my trenches at 10mm because I put a foot on the bottom of the router bit of the tool. The bottom of the box. So I have a regulation 10 millimetres. If you wish to use thicker material, you can lift the route a bit after your first cut. So do your first cut, then lift the route a bit, a little bit more, and do a deeper cut, which means you can put a thicker piece of material in. If you want to come higher up and make it more than 10 millimetres underneath the bottom so that you can do a bit of fancy stuff on the bottom of the box, you can do that as well. You've got plenty of room to move with. Okay, so that's this is our first task. So now, bit of tape, and this is where I talk about the safety issues. I don't want the box to fall apart, so I'm putting some tape around it to hold the box together. This box is not glued. It's just been, the dovetail's just been cut in it. And I find this the easiest way to use this, rather than put a fence up and then use the fence and cut all the way through. That way we don't end up with little cutouts in the side of the box. So my box is taped together. I'm going to do this one as well. And the reason I've got two of them is to show that you can actually do two different ones at the same time if you're using the same height for the feet. Now here's the technique that I use, that I do with this box. This is what we call a desktop box. So if you have a look, this is what my desktop box looks like. It's you can see that it has the base in the bottom. It also has a lid in it, and you can see it's got a trench inside there. Okay, so trench in the bottom, trench in the top. And so what I'll do with that is I'm going to cut a trench in the bottom of this box, then I'm going to flip it over and cut a trench in the bottom of that one there. And now because I've got this big one here, I'm going to do that one as well. Okay, so three different things, and this just shows that you can do the whole lot together, everything at the same time. I've noticed on this one here, this is moving, and I don't want it to move, so I'll re-tape the top edge of it. The tape I'm using here is just fibre reinforced tape. I'm not sticking it right down hard. What I'm trying to do is just hold the box together. I don't want it to fall apart. And as I said to you earlier, safety is a high priority. Okay, so I can just rotate around the inside of that. You can use a table saw or other tools. I find this one really, really nice, but it's all about this router bit. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to rotate around the inside of the box. Just find my earmuffs. Turn it on over there. Now, because I'm only cutting a shallow trench, doing the start of the cut, what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate with the rotation of the router bit. So I'm going to go around basically the wrong cut, the wrong way. People call it back cutting, or climb routing is a technique that's used often. And so we're going to do that to do the first one. And the reason for that is that it's going to scoop a little bit out of material out as it goes along, rather than actually forcing against the tooth. So we'll do that little bit and we'll do that to both of these boxes, and we'll go from there. You right? Okay, ears on everybody. You'll notice that I leave the box sitting over the router bit while it's spinning until it stops, being safe. Okay, now let's go to this camera here. I just want to, I'll take that little bit off, just want to show you what that's done. You can see that I have this really nice clean trench, and it goes all the way around. You can see in two different types of material, and it's very, very clean shouldered. Okay, so the shoulders are nice and clean, and I'll just put that over onto the side. And now I'll do both sides of this one. So ears on, everybody. And you can see nice little trench. If I flip it over, ears on. So that's given me a trench at the top and the bottom of the box. So just a small trench, and it's a start. And you can see that in both cases, really sharp, clean trenches. You can see they're really nicely done. So what I want to do now is continue the cut. Now, make sure everything's turned off. What I'm doing here is I'm holding the corner of my push block up against the tooth, because I'm going to undo the nut on the top of it. If you use your fingers, you're pushing the sharp tooth against your fingers, and you're likely to cut yourself. I put the original bearing back on it. This time I don't need the push block. I can just hold that and push that down. Get those out of the way. Now, because we're now cutting, and as you can see here, I'll just point with this, you can see that the depth of cut from the outside of the tooth to the bearing is much, much deeper. If I tried to cut, I'll just go to a different camera here. If I tried to cut with the rotation around a bit, in this case, because we've got so much tooth exposed, we're likely to tear it out of our fingers, and that will cause yourself some damage and some injury. So the best thing to do is to make sure that when you're doing your second cut is rotate against the rotation of the router bit, which is what you should be doing in most cases. Okay, so this time we're going back the other way. So back to the camera. So now you can see the difference in the trench. You can see that it's very deep there and very shallow here. So you'll notice that I didn't change any settings. All I did was change the bearing on the cutter. I didn't change the settings. So keep your settings the same when you're doing your second cut, unless of course you've done a thicker set, because then you're going to have to drop it down the second time round. Ears on. So you can see now, you can see the trench is really difficult to see in that because it's such a small box. So I'll do the big one and you'll be able to see it better in that one. So I'll just put that one aside. Ears on. So now you can see, I'll go back to the other camera. Now you can see really deep trench, 5 millimeters deep to be exact, and that's what you want to try and achieve. Is get a nice deep trench. The material that I'm using here is 12 mil on this one here. On this box here, it's 8 millimeters. Okay, so even when you got the two different thickness materials, you're still getting a really nice result. Now, I've cut the trenches for the base, so what I'm going to do now is I'll make the base to fit the trench. So that's the task that I would do. So I've already done that, by the way, and I generally don't make the bases or the lids or anything like that until such time as I actually build the box frame. So we just pull this apart. Okay, so what I have now is I have this nice little set of trenches in the box. All right, so I'll just go back here. And this is the bottom of the box. And it's just a matter of, I've made the bases for it. Now, this one may not fit because, oh, it does. There you go. So, as you can see, fits the trench in there nicely. It's that way up. And there's the base sitting in the bottom of the box. And you can see quite a nice little neat fit, quite easy to do. The next task would be to make the lid for this one here so that it fits into there. So I have to rebate something. So my next cutter is going to be, I just want to go through these things deliberately one at a time. So the next cutter, I would do the same with the base for that too. The next cutter will be my panel racing bit. Now, the panel racing bit looks like this. This is my panel racing bit. Just come down a bit closer. If you can see that, I'll just take my fingers off it, and you can see it has rounded corners. Now, the panel raising bit, these ones here were basically developed from a standard one. The standard router bit has the tooth on it is generally straight up and down, about 1 degree angle on it. Whereas these ones here have been cranked over to 8 degrees. And what that does is give you a much more of a shearing cut so that it minimises the amount of sanding that you might have to do in the rebate. Okay, so particularly when you're cutting across the grain. So it's quite a good little router bit, okay, handy to have. But as you can see, there's no bearing on the top of it, and so therefore what we need to do is make a fence for it. Now, I'm going to show you how I make the fences You may not have a Gifkins or a flat top table like this, but the technique that I'm using here is one that's been developed over a period of time, and it's relatively successful, and you can do lots of different things. You can make lots of different fences. So I've got that in the cutter. Now, when it comes to fences, this is my panel raising fence, and you can see that it's the same shape as the router bit. When you look at it, you can see the rounded curves on the top and the bottom of it. Okay, so what we need to do is I'm going to show you how I make the fences. Now, this is just made out of a piece of radiata, and that's what it looks like. Okay, so just bare bit of radiata. I've put an 8.1mm hole in the top of it, because in the end of my table, you can't actually see that on the camera. In the table, I have a threaded hole. It's got an 8mm thread, so the hand knobs that we sell look like this. Okay, so they're the types of hand knobs we have, and they're 50mm, just enough to go through the fence and screw onto the table. Okay, now let's go back here again. I'm going to cut that in a second, and I'll show you how that's done. But first of all, what I need to do is, I have a 10mm piece of material here. I have a 10mm piece of material, and I'm going to put that into the top of my little box here. Okay, so from the bottom of the trench to the top is 10mm, because that's what I had the router bit set at. So my trench is 4mm, and I've got 6mm of free material at the top. So 6 and 4 is 10. Obviously that's the size of that. So if I set my router bit at 6mm, it means I'm going to have a 4mm step in here, a 6mm rebate. It gives me 4mm to play with, which will fit into the trench. So with my ruler, set my height. I hope you're keeping up with this. I set my height at 6mm. You can't see it, but I can see it. I'm just a little bit under it. It's always a good idea to go a little bit less when you're doing this, and then you can always creep up on it. Now, if I run this over the top of the fence over the top of my router bit, you would see I would cut a rebate in there at exactly 6mm, and if I have to raise it up a tiny little bit, because I haven't cut enough out of my piece of material, then it would rub against the underneath of the fence. Okay, so I'm going to bring that up to 7mm, which is a little bit higher than I normally would. So I'm up to 7mm. Lock that down. Find my earmuffs. Okay, ears on everybody. All I'm going to do now is I'm just going to pass over the top of the router bit. And there I have my rebate in the bottom of the fence. There's still plenty of meat at the top of it here to give it lots of support. I have a flat face on the top of there, I have a flat face on there. All I need to do now panel razor, and I've made myself a nice little fence. So now it's just a matter of set up and go from there. Now, the important thing about this is you must go against the rotation of the router bit or against the tooth. So the tooth is here, the router bit is going to spin in this direction. Okay, so I'm going to push against this edge here, which means I'm going to come along this way. So I'll lock that in place. Reset my height. Now remember, I had it set at 7mm, I only wanted it at 6mm. Like so. So I've dropped down. Now the beauty of this is, if I can get this camera a little bit closer for you, the beauty of this is that when you have your router bit spinning, you don't have a lot of room around the router bit where things can dive in and deviate out of the way. So, so you get a nice clean cut, but the other thing about it is the majority of the router bit is covered. Okay, the only bit that's exposed is the tiny little bit you're using. So when I measure for my top, I'll measure across the box, of course, across to the other side, and I'll get the right size piece. And when I measure for this, what I'm doing is bottom of the trench. Okay, so you can see that it's actually gone to 5mm. If you can, you can't really read that, but I can see it's 5mm trench. With this router bit, the radius on the corners of the router bit need 3mm of clearance so that it doesn't bind in the trench. Okay, so you don't want it binding in the top edge of the trench when you cut your rebate in there. So 5mm plus your 3mm is 8mm, of course. So I set my fence at 8mm. Like so. And I'll lock my fence in place. Okay, and so here's my piece of material that I'm going to use as the top. I've already cut it and shaped it and got it ready to the right size and everything like that. So all I'm going to do now is pass this over the top of that. So I might actually get that camera around. I'll just go to there. We can move this camera right around to the other side. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to push through like so. What I need is a push block. Let's get a bit closer. All right, ears on everybody. You may not be able to see this as I go over the top of it, but you'll see the result. And now you can see that I've cut a nice little rebate in the bottom of there. All I need to do is test it. And you can test it just by sitting it like so. Okay, so haven't taken enough off. So now, because I had a little bit of room to play with, I can actually come up a tiny little bit and just recut. Now, I did that by eye. You don't need to sort of be really prescriptive about this. You want a little bit of movement in there anyway, so that the material will actually float around inside the groove, and you can see that one fits pretty much spot on. So all I need to do now is go around the whole of the thing. So the first cut that I do has been on the end grain. Now, I always cut the end grain, because if I have any tear out on the outside edges of it, and I'll just show you, I need to be here. If I have any tear out on the outside edges of it, I can pick it up when I cut along the outside edges. Okay, so now I'm going to redo the other side, the other end, and then I'll do both the sides and fit the lid. Ears on. Okay, so it's as simple as that. So now it's just a matter of popping the lid in place, like so. Put the top back on. And you can see, need to have a look here, and you can see I now have a nice, neat fitting lid. Okay, so quite a simple task, but a really nice result in the end. So now I'm flush at the bottom, at the top I should say. I've got my lid fitting at the bottom. I can have a little play with that box and make it into something that you know, that may not be the same as that. It might have various things. One of the other things that I do with them as well is this, where I've cut the back out of it a little bit, and I put pin hinges in, and I've actually got a hinged box lid. Okay, so there's that technique. This is a little bit more difficult than doing the other technique, but because this one here just has sleeves in it and a lift-off lid. Very simple, very easy to make. Okay, so that's the techniques used for that. My next router bit that I use, I'll just get rid of all of this stuff. So that's two of the router bits. Now what I would do with that box is I would glue it together, and then I would cut the top off it. So you can see I've got an expanded joint here, and I would generally cut through the top of that. So one of the other router bits that we have in the kit is this one here. Now it's a 4mm spiral bit. It's a stock item of Carby Tool. You can buy it over the counter. We have it added to the kit because we use it for taking the tops off the boxes. So I'm going to cut the top off a box for you. So I'll just remove this. Now as you can see, the difference between the two, this one here is a 1/4 inch shank, and the one that I'm taking out is a 1/2 inch shank. So they're quite large. So we need a reducing collet here. Go back here. So we need a reducing collet. So that's our reducing collet. Drop that in. Incidentally, they don't come in the kit of router bits. You need to buy that as a separate item if you're going to purchase a reducing collet. So now, I have another box. This one here. Now, this has been glued together. And I've deliberately made this one so that you can see the joints. You can see that the joints are quite large. And this one here is the expanded joint, so I'm going to cut the lid off through that point there. Now, again, I do this in two passes. My first pass is half the thickness of the material. Now, that doesn't have to be an exact measurement. It can be whatever you want it to be. Okay, so I'm only going to go halfway through. And what we need for that is we need a fence as well. Now, this is going to be a little bit more difficult to be able to see. So the fence is going to sit on this side of the router bit. The fence is going to sit on this side of the router bit. So we'll have to try and get the camera so we can see over this side. So I'm going to use that same fence that I just made. Sit it on there. I'll find my hand up. Again, here is something where you can be fastidious and use a ruler and measure and so forth. I tend not to. I tend to sort of do it by eye. It sort of adds that little bit of individuality to the box, you might say. So all I've done is I've just marked probably the centre of the expanded joint, which is about there. Okay, so that's close enough. So when I set up, Pam, I might get you to move that camera around to this side so you can see what's going on there. Thank you. If you can see that. There's my mark, just there. And my clamp. So I clamp my fence in place, like so. Now, the secret to using a router bit like this, what you need to have is the router bit's going to spin in this direction. So what you have to have is you have to have the router bit pushing your work against the fence. If you come back the other way, so if I can say I came this way, it's pulling the work away during the cutting process. We want it to push against the fence. If you have it pulling away from the fence, you're going to get squiggles down the side of your box, right? Little cuts that you don't want. It just means lots of work later on. So it's just a matter of pushing over the top of the router bit like so. I can see we're not going to get through everything today, so we're going to have a 3-week program. Unfortunately, doesn't matter. So that's the way it's going to go. So we're going to get as far as we can. So now I'm just going to rotate around the box. Now when I cut this one, I push away from myself, and then I'll rock it back towards myself, push away again, and I'll rotate around this way. It seems to be the easiest. It's the way I've done most of my cutting, and it works exceptionally well. So I sort of try to stick to habits that I've created. So a flat side first, or long side first, and then we'll just cut through there. Now, the router bit is a very delicate router bit. I'll just come up here. The router bit is very, very delicate. It's very, very small, and sort of delicate and router bit together in the same sentence. Whoa, who would have thought? Anyway, it's a very fine router bit. If you shove things really hard, if you really put your weight into it, you're going to break the router bit. The other thing about this little character here, I've got a concrete floor. If you drop it on the floor, generally it's straight into the bin, okay, because you'll break it. And that's how delicate they are, how light they are. So the secret is to allow the router bit to do the cutting. So you need to go relatively smoothly through your cut. You don't want to go too slow, otherwise you'll burn things. If you go too fast, like I say, it's going to break the router bit, or it's just not going to cut very efficiently. So just work around. It's something I feel that you will eventually get. Okay, so let's cut. Ears on. Now, you can use any tool you like to cut the top off a box. I tend to like using this router bit. That's why we add it to our kit. You can see there's a bit of furry stuff on there. It works effectively because by using the fence, I'm getting a parallel cut all the way around the box. Okay, so all the way around the box, it's all nice and parallel. And when I set up to do the rest of it, cut the rest of it off, you'll find that it's just going to continue through the cut. Now, the reason I do that, I do the two cuts, is because at the end of the cut, the last cut, you've got nothing supporting your material. It bangs together over the router bit and causes some damage here. Okay, so we don't want that to happen. We want a nice, smooth process. So now, this is how we go about getting it nice and even. Just going to raise the router bit up so that we're just cutting through the material. And I have a splitting sleeve. This is what I use to cut. Excuse my back, folks. That and a bit of tape. And I'll start on the long side. Now, during this cut, if you can put the camera so you can poke it into that, there you can see the cut happening on the inside. Just bring it over to about here. Okay, ears on everybody. Now for the last bit of the cut, I'm just going to replace the material I just took out just by putting a little sleeve in there and giving it some support. The sleeve is the same thickness as the diameter of the router bit. So I'm just going to wrap a little bit of tape around that. Just to hold it all together. And finish the cut. Ears on. Now you can see at the end of it, where I finished the cut, right at the end there, it's nice and clean, it's nice and straight. So if I just peel off my tape. And there's my two parts, and this needs a bit of a tidy up. So a little bit of a tidy up there. Now the reason that's all furry is because it's a furry material. So that's how we use the TSRW5, which is the code for that router bit. Now, the next router bit that I'm going to use is a tenon cutter. So we're going to get part the way through that before we have to finish today. But I use it for a lot of various different things that happen around the boxes. So far, what you've seen today is you've seen how to use the rebate cutter, how to use the panel raising bit, and how to use the TSRW5 to cut the top off. So that's three of the router bits that we used, and that's well, the first one was used in conjunction with the big bearing anyway, so you knew exactly what was going on there. And that's another task that we've done. Now the next task, there are a large number of different things that I use this one for. And I'll use that in conjunction with the tenon cutter sometimes, or with the rebate cutter sometimes. So we'll go ahead and do that. I think the two that are left to use are the tenon cutter and the slot cutter. Now, the tenon cutter has the same shape as the rebate cutter, as the panel raising bit, except it's got sharp corners on the top. If you can see that, get that closer. You can see it's got nice sharp corners on the top. It's exactly the same shape, same diameter, 32 millimeters, and the angle of the tooth is also set at 8 degrees for that shearing action. Now, the other router bit that we use in conjunction with each other is this one here, which is the slot cutter. Now, it comes like this. I'll just show you what it looks like when it's in the packet. And it's a stock item that comes over the counter. You can see it comes in two parts. It's got the cutter, and it's got the shank, and the shank has a 4 millimeter screw on the top of it to hold the whole lot together. So you need to assemble it before you actually start. Now, a 4 millimeter Allen key is adequate to do that sort of thing. So you'll need to put that together so that you end up with this. And by the way, the washer goes on the outside of the cutter, so you can do that. Now, that comes in lots of different sizes. So I use a 6mm for some things, I use a 4mm for something. This is a 3.2, which is adequate for doing the little box that we just did a minute ago. Okay, so the trench for the feet, for the bases. So unfortunately, we've run out of time. So I think next week what we might do is I'll build a frame and panel lid by using these. I'll do another couple of other different things. One of the things that I will be doing, I have to make the box, but I will show you how to actually do the fitting of this particular type of box, where I have a straight cut shoulder for the lid to fit onto. Okay, so that fits on like so. That's that type of box. It's not one that I do very often, but it will be something I'll show you next week as to how it goes about. So we got part the way through it. But I think that's about it for today. I'll stop there so that we don't go into half jobs next week. We start with something very, very new and go from there. Now, if you're watching Dave's going to do a rehash of last week's cutting of using the jig, cutting his dovetails, but he's going to use the technique that I've sort of, that is explained in the manuals and so forth. So he's going to go over that again for you. The other things he's got going on, I've just got to find my board. Can't see it. Anyway, Dave's got a whole lot of stuff happening. I think he's got, somebody has sent in some information about a hobby that actually turned into a paying career. So that could be interesting. I think he's got a competition going for a set of earmuffs, or eye muffs I should say, so the winner of that will be done. I think what also he did was he's exposed a little bit of hewn, or going to expose some hewn in an inlay on the back of his cabinet that he made last week for the cameras. So could be interesting, could be a nice show. So I think that's about it for us today. So if you like what you saw today, I hope you enjoyed what we did, and I hope you got something out of it. So if you haven't subscribed already, subscribe to our channel, press the bell so you get a reminder, and a few thumbs up would be nice. So have a good week, everybody, and I will see you all next Sunday.